Hey y'all, I chose to do my leadership profile over Hitler. So if you have any questions at the end, just let me know. Hitler was born in April 20th of 1889 to his father Alois and mother Clara. And his father actually changed his name to Hitler from some long word that I can't pronounce in 1876. And there's actually speculation that Hitler actually has a Jewish descent in his family. It would be his grandfather, but as of right now, there's no credible evidence to completely support this. As a child, Hitler dreamed of going to the Vienna Academy of Arts, but his father was completely against this. So when his father died, Hitler convinced his mother to let him apply, and while his mother was dying from breast cancer, he took the entrance exam to the academy. He was not only rejected once, but twice. And then once his mother passed away, he moved to Vienna to try and gain entrance to this academy again, only to become homeless. But luckily, he had some family that could help him through this time and help him survive. But he also relied on personal and business relationships with the Jewish people, which is kind of interesting since he had such a hatred for Jews at the end of his life. In 1913, he moved to Munich to avoid being arrested for evading military service in Austria-Hungary, but then was forced to return only to fail his physical, so he was not able to serve in the war. But when World War I began, he applied to serve with the German army and was accepted. He mainly was thought to not front on front lines, but he did fight a number of significant battles, was wounded, and was decorated with the Iron Cross First Class and the Black Wound Badge for bravery. These honors he received as a result of his involvement in the war began to show his initial makings of a leader. He was very upset after the war. He felt that the German army had been betrayed, and he was not happy with the Treaty of Versailles. He felt that it was demeaning, that due to the fact it demanded Germany to accept responsibility for starting the war. And in 1919, he joined the DAP, which is essentially this super long name that I can't say, but it's abbreviated Nazi. So at this point, this is when he becomes part of the Nazi government, I guess you could say. And he was actually responsible for designing the Nazi symbol. Due to his strong beliefs and desires, Hitler was adamant to make his voice heard, and he did so by replacing Drexler as the Nazi Party chairman in 1921. After this, he began to have speeches, and he had an early follower, which was Captain Ernest Röhm, and he was the head of the Nazi paramilitary organization, or the SA, which protected meetings and often attacked political opponents. So with this, in 1923, Hitler and the SA raged a public meeting announcing that the National Revolution had declared the formation of a new government. Hitler ended up being arrested and tried for high treason, receiving 5 years in prison, although he only served about 9 months. During that 9 months, he actually wrote his first volume of his autobiography and political manifesto. And in that first volume of that, Hitler just discussed his anti-Semitic, pro-Aryan views, along with his sense of quote-unquote betrayal with the outcome of World War I, and called for revenge against France and the eastward expansion into Russia. Then his second volume just literally said how he was going to gain this power and maintain it. Excuse me. In 1932, Hitler ran against Paul von Hindenburg for president, and although he lost both rounds, he gathered more than 36% of the vote in the final count. These results created a strong face for Hitler, and it essentially caused Hindenburg to reluctantly agree to appoint Hitler as Chancellor in order to promote political balance. And Hitler used this position to form a de facto legal dictatorship. So he engineered then the passage of the Enabling Act, which basically gave Hitler's cabinet complete legislative power for a period of 4 years and allowed for deviations from the Constitution. In 1933, Hitler's Nazi Party was named the only legal political party in Germany, and the day before Hindenburg died, the cabinet established a new law that abolished the president. So that gave the powers of president and chancellor became combined, which gave Hitler complete power over the state and the government, which is exactly what Hitler wanted. He wanted to be commander of armed forces and everything. He wanted all this power, and that position gave him the ultimate power. From 1933 to when the war began, Hitler and his Nazi government instituted multiple rules to restrict and exclude the Jews in society. Not only Jews, but disabled children, disabled adults, and homosexuals, and Poles as well. They also created a law that anyone that had 3 or 4 grandparents who were Jewish, regardless whether the person practiced Jewish religion, they were a Jew. And then, of course, when the Winter and Summer Olympics Games were held, Hitler and his government ceased all of their beliefs and actions to avoid criticism from the negative impact on tourism. But after the Olympics, the persecution on Jews became worse. And slowly but surely, Hitler was able to exclude Jews completely from society. Close to 100 Jews were killed on the Night of Broken Glass, and about 30,000 were captured and sent to concentration camps. And around that time, in 1938, Hitler was also named Time Magazine's Man of the Year, which I thought was completely crazy. Hitler and his army were responsible for about the deaths of 10 million people, and 6 million of them were Jews. And of course, his final solution was the Holocaust. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, which started World War II, and then France and Britain then declared war on Germany 2 days later. Hitler began expanding his troops into Norway and Denmark and France and the Netherlands and Belgium, and then ordered bombing raids on the United Kingdom. And in 1941, he sent German troops to the Soviet Union in the attack of Pearl Harbor. Essentially, then Hitler realized that he was in a war with all the Allied powers, and thinking that he would be able to play the Allies against one another, he quickly learned that he would not be able to do that. The German officers finally began to realize that defeat was inevitable, and that Hitler's continued rule would result in the complete destruction of the country. So in July of 1944, a group of people actually tried to assassinate Hitler, although they failed. Hitler realized finally in early 1945 that he was going to lose this war, and after he was married on April 29th, April 30th, him and his wife committed suicide. When I'm looking at these different types of leadership, I chose utilitarianism and political realism. Utilitarianism is defined as the ethical doctrine that virtue is based on utility, and that conduct should be directed toward promoting the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. So as a utilitarian leader, we see that their goal is to promote the greatest happiness to the largest amount of people. Utilitarianism is a theology type of leadership, meaning it's concerned with the goals and achieving these goals. As noted above, Hitler's goal to win war against Czechoslovakia and France and Britain and the Soviet Union and finally the United States. He also had the goal to rid the world of Jews, homosexuals, disabled people, Poles, communists, different people like that. And as a utilitarian leader, they saw that if the consequences were good, then the act to achieve the consequence was good as well. Therefore, Hitler felt very justified in his actions against anyone who stood in the way of his ultimate goal. As a utilitarian leader, Hitler initially had the support of the majority of people in Germany and believed achieving their ultimate happiness was worth every sacrifice. Political realism, when you look at this position, you see that it's essentially a position that says anything goes in politics. It indicates that it's okay to lie, it's okay to cheat, as long as it helps you get to your goal. And political realism also says that power and success are all that is important in this world, and people are selfish, and that is okay. And as the goal of a leader in political realism, it's to gain orderly society, and the only way to do that is to gain complete power. And Hitler shows this in his reign because he worked very hard to gain complete power over his country through the unfortunate loss of the position to Hindenburg when he was running for office. As Hindenburg tried to keep the peace across party lines, Hitler exposed that weakness by using his position to change laws, which eventually gave him the ultimate power over both state and government, which is exactly what he wanted. There's also this aspect of whether it's better to be loved or feared under political realism, and whether or not appearance is better than reality. So Hitler, I'm sure, thought it was better to be feared, as all these people feared him anyway, especially the Jewish society, and appearance was better than reality. It was better to appear a good person than to actually be a good person. And Hitler shows that immensely when he altered the treatment of the Jews during the Olympic Games. Hitler was so focused on himself and not only making himself happy, but also the German people whose goals aligned with his. And it wasn't until the end of his reign that he began to not only make others unhappy, but the realization of his goals waned. And when you look back at Hitler and the type of leader that he was, you see that regardless of all the awful things that he did accomplish several goals, and he was clearly a leader of his time. Thanks for listening.